My name's Milos. If you haven't already, please subscribe, check my channel out. Trying to be consistent, trying to basically keep up with the content and keep informing you about what's going on in the NBA. Today, I want to go over this old ass team, for a lack of a better word. So we have Chris Paul and Bradley Beal now joining the Los Angeles Clippers organization. Now, with them joining, Chris Paul, a 40-year-old, Bradley Beal, I believe, 34, 35, one of the two, them joining the team, they are now the oldest NBA team in NBA history. Now, with that being said, I do believe they have a chance to get to the finals. And why do I believe this? Well, when you have a collection of stars like Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, Bradley Beal, Chris Paul, Zubac, you have role players, Derrick Jones Jr., you have Chris Dunn, you have a lot of different players that combine them together, they're able to gel well, if that makes any sense. Because you have a guy in Chris Paul who's a distributor, a natural born leader, and every organization that he's been to, he's made into a winning organization. When you look at the Thunder, even the Spurs, even though they didn't make the playoffs, their regular season record was way better than the last season without Chris Paul. Chris Paul is going to bring a huge impact on this Los Angeles Clippers team, and they'll be formidable. But do I think they'll be able to compete with, the Oklahoma City Thunder, Denver Nuggets? Yes, I believe they'll be able to compete with those teams, but are they going to win is the question. And if I have to go off of history with the Los Angeles Clippers, I wouldn't bet my money on them. Only because we've seen Kawhi Leonard, Paul George come together healthy, go to the playoffs, and not meet up to expectations. Now, some of those years was because of their injuries, and I don't fault them for some of those. But some of those years that they did lose, like against Luka Doncic and the Mavericks, to me, there was no excuse why they lost. And especially those beginning years of when Paul George and Kawhi were on that team, a lot of people predicted that they would be an NBA champion by now, holding up the trophy. But as we can see, the Los Angeles Clippers, they get rid of Paul George. They still have Kawhi Leonard, who's very injury prone, doesn't play many games. The games he does play, he's very impactful, but not all the time does it lead to winning, as we saw last year when they lost in a tough 7-game series against Denver Nuggets. Now, with all that being said, this team on paper, they look very formidable. They look like they can win the championship. And with Chris Paul looking to finally get a ring, he has that motivation with this team to be the best version that he can be at 40 years old. Now, the question is, one, can they remain healthy? If we go off of that fact alone, history has shown us that they can't remain healthy. Two, are guys like Chris Paul and James Harden going to be able to mesh together and play well together? That is seen. We've seen it in Houston with the Rockets, but we also seen how it ended. James Harden and Chris Paul's relationship, they didn't get along, even though they almost made the finals together and they made the conference finals, lost in a tough 7-game series to the Golden State Warriors. But a lot of people said that Game 6, if Chris Paul didn't get injured and he played in Game 7, they would have beat the Golden State Warriors with a Kevin Durant on their team. So we know Chris Paul and James Harden are formidable. Now, are they compatible? We'll see. We'll see, and they can play together now that they're older. I'm sure there won't be any disagreements. And they also have Kawhi Leonard, a guy who's a quiet leader, but is not a guy who will shy away from the moment, if that makes sense, even though he's quiet. They have a good collection of pieces. If I mentioned this earlier, they have Chris Dunn, John Collins, Ben Simmons, Nicholas Batum, Zubac, Patty Mills. They're just really old, though. So we'll see how it works. I'm excited that Chris Paul is happy. He wanted to go to Los Angeles, especially the Los Angeles Clippers, because that felt like home to him. But I don't know if this is going to be his path to win a championship. Unfortunate to say. But what I can say is Chris Paul is a top 10 point guard of all time, and he's a top 75 player of all time. And his greatness shouldn't be denied. A lot of people, like I've seen Kendrick Perkins, he didn't have him in the top 10, which to me is absolutely ridiculous when you go off of he's second in assists, he's second in steals. His prime years with the Hornets, he was arguably a top 5 player all those years, was second in MVP voting one of those years, leads his teams to deep in the playoffs. And this is without like a certified superstar on his squad. The only certified superstar on his squad that were in their prime was probably James Harden, but that was later in his career. Even the Clippers with Blake Griffin, I never considered Blake Griffin at best he was a star, and he was a dog. Like, let's not get it twisted, but he wasn't a superstar. Like when you say Blake Griffin and when you say James Harden, there's a separator. There's definitely a huge separator between those two, in my opinion. Anyways, I just wanted to give my take on how I feel about the Los Angeles Clippers and Chris Paul just going to that team. I think they'll be able to make some noise, but a lot of it is yet to be seen. And I think with the many X factors and the many issues that the Clippers have dealt with for years, I wouldn't bet my money on Chris Paul winning a championship ever. So this may be his last year, and we may never see Chris Paul win an NBA championship ever again. Let me know y'all thoughts, and until next time, Milos out. Peace.